Hello there folks, my name's Ben, welcome to another Shots Fired Airsoft video, and today I've got the shooting test or firing review of the Val-M series or Valkyrie M series by Black Raisins, which, as we discussed in the previous video, is a licensed version of the Leon Valkyrie, which is a blaster that originated in China. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, I did have a little bit of a failure with this blaster. And essentially what happened was it lost the ability to catch. So essentially when you obviously prime it, I'll try and do it sideways, it will catch the piston at the back of the blaster, and then when you release the trigger it will come forward. Essentially it stopped priming, so it stopped catching the spring at the back of the blaster. Got in touch with the guys at Black Raisins and Miles over here in the UK, and essentially they sorted out a new set of parts, and essentially a new piston, a new sear, which is the part the trigger acts upon to release the catch, and they got those parts out to me. I've got it back together and it has worked perfectly ever since. I'm going to send the parts back to Miles when I get around to it, and essentially they're going to go through and see what failed, I've got my sneaking suspicions that this hole for this pin that is through the back of the sear and actually locates the sear was actually the hole was bored too large, so essentially the sear could move up and down, which meant that the way it acted on the piston could also vary depending on how it was primed. If I put my finger on the back and primed it, it would catch every time. So that out of the way, the blaster is very easy to disassemble if you do have an issue. Essentially you just pull the stock out, and then there are, if I can get my camera to focus, 3 primary bolts. You don't have to do anything with this unit. You undo these bolts and this whole block slides out the back, and that allows you instant access to your piston, spring, and various other components, and also into your grip. So essentially this whole section will come off with the 3 bolts removed. So I can see it here, I've got it set up with a vertical foregrip from Worker, and I've got just a little EOTech sort of fake EOTech sight. I didn't really have any problems other than what was mentioned with the sear and sort of the catch not really working properly. I also mentioned the fact that in the first video I mentioned that some of these parts are 3D printed. They're actually, a lot of these parts are machined Delrin, so obviously the main difference with this blaster is it is made out of molded Delrin, and things like the trigger, the sear, the trigger guard are actually machined Delrin, so they are of a higher quality than a similar 3D printed part. In Nerf or dart blasting, essentially the main purpose of the weapon is to be an ergonomically pleasing way of getting air through a barrel to act upon a dart. When it comes down to accuracy and general firing, that is usually related to the quality of ammo you are using and how the barrel is rifled. Obviously, a cylinder volume to barrel length is important still. However, the main job of the Nerf blaster itself, or the dart blaster itself, is to consistently release air into the barrel to act upon the dart. So with that said, let's get into the chronograph footage that I got of this, and there are 2 tests. One is a test of the Worker sort of generation 3 style darts. Nerf sort of reviews that I do in the future will be done based on essentially the Worker Gen 2 high-end darts, which I now have in stock. I didn't have them at the time, so I end up using Worker Gen 3s. They're still a very good dart, but they aren't the dart that the Worker Gen 2 high-end is. They have a different foam, like a stiffer foam, more consistent foam, and better gluing on the heads. So with that said, we'll have a look at the Worker darts, and we're getting a good, nice sort of clean 205, 206, and very consistent firing with that dart. And that's the important thing, and that's what we are looking for, is the consistency with that dart. The power that's going into that dart is consistent, so therefore it is leaving up to the bearing scale on the front and the dart itself to work, essentially work its way towards the target. The other test that we're doing is the GOS night darts, and these are the darts that I use in CQB. They have glow heads on them, so when they go through a tracer they will actually light up like an airsoft BB, and these darts are considerably lighter, around 0.7 grams. and what this means is that you get a boost in FPS up to about, well, with this it loves these darts at around 265. Again, nice and consistent, it's always around that sort of mark, and that's what we're looking for. In Nerf, like a really consistent firing blaster is around 6 to 7 FPS variation over like 10 darts, and this achieves that, which is brilliant. Even though the air seal on it is not that fantastic, as we've discussed in the first video, I have not altered the air seal. So moving along, the reason the GOS darts are essentially lighter is probably due to a thing with the manufacturing. However, what that does mean is that in CQB they are not as accurate, but over 20 meters they are accurate enough where the initial velocity is an advantage, so your dart's going to get to its target faster. The worker dart is more suitable over long distance. It's heavier at around 1 gram rather than 0.7 grams, and that means it carries accuracy and power downrange better than the lighter GOS darts. So with that said, I do have a bit of firing footage. This was taken off my Runcam scope cam, and a new addition to the channel, and this is the first blaster it's been used on, so I'm still getting used to using and editing the footage. Again, the firing test and accuracy of this blaster, kind of not that important, because at the end of the day it's dictated by the bearing, either the string scar or bearing scar that you actually have attached to the weapon. In this case I actually have a very old string scar barrel, and this has always been very effective with worker darts, and this is what I actually use. So I had some Gen 3 glow darts along with that scar. I'm going to say bearing scar because most of them are bearings now, or becoming bearings. And as you can see, we can get out there and we can tap the target around 20 meters, not a problem at all. I can push the target back to about 30 and you'll still get hits. However, at this sort of 205 kind of FPS with worker darts, you are having to start into lob darts to effectively hit 30 meters. So you need to be up around the 270, 280 with worker darts to get a more flat shot. But it did a fine job, and I say that really the actual firing of the targets is more down for just like an example, because I say that your accuracy will vary greatly depending on what darts and what kind of rifling you're using. So anyway, just to get into the final sort of feelings on the blaster. Cons. Now, this is a very compact, very well built platform. The only problem with it being very compact is it does not have the cylinder volume of something like a Caliburn, and it doesn't have the draw either. So essentially when we're talking draw, we're referring to the distance that the blaster actually primes over, and as you can see it's only around, well, slightly less than the span of my hand, and this means that the draw is very stiff because this is a 14 kilogram spring and you're tensing it over a very small distance. As a Caliburn, the draws are more like this sort of size, about that kind of length, which is nearly the length of this, you know, like 3/4 length of this blaster, or at least the shell at least anyway. And that means that you can get away with a much heavier spring and it will remain relatively light prime weight because you have such a long draw. The only thing I'd really aim at the Valkyrie or the Val-M is that with this shorter draw, when you start pushing towards 250-ish FPS, that is such a spring weight that you are going to struggle to repeatedly prime it during gameplay. My left arm was aching like no one's business when I was using this. Because I'm not used to this kind of draw weight. I'm used to using things like Caliburns and Swifts that get away with huge spring weights by having an obnoxiously long draw. And that's just the way things are. The only real other thing that I didn't really get on with is, or I don't think it's too fantastic, is the way the barrel's set up. It does work very well, and having the barrel shroud act as a guide rod for the sort of priming block at the front, do like it a lot. It'd just be nice to have something a bit more elegant than having to put the barrel shroud in, then inserting the barrel with tape to kind of like shore it up in the middle, and then putting a bolt in. One of the things that I do kind of level at like high level Nerf at the moment is that there's too much taping and stuff going on. It's like really these things should be coming out with sorted, a more sorted way of putting these things together and holding them together. We shouldn't be taping anything, we shouldn't be doing this, that and the other. They should just work out of the box without having to do stuff like that. I'm pretty certain the original reason that this failed was because they actually encourage rather than having a brass bushing inserted in this sear that is actually the correct size for the ID for the pin, there is a hole bored in the bare dowel ring, and then you have to tape the pin to make sure that there's no play, and over time that tape's just going to flatten and all that, and that will change. That will allow us to play in the sear. You know, why these don't come with a brass bushing bored through and pressed into place or epoxied into place that then can run on the pin, that would be fantastic. One of the things we need to get away from in order for high-end Nerf to really sort of catch on in our sort of hobby space of competitive shooting games is these things really have to be a bit more professionally done. Again, it seems weird that we have fantastic materials now, moulded dowel in. The actual platform itself is brilliant, and then we've got things like this kind of letting it down a bit. There's got to be a better way. Anyway, apart from that, fantastic weapon. Again, very high sort of draw effort, which is you know, we're shooting for higher FPS with this. I believe the original Valkyrie is around 130 to 150 FPS, which is going to be a lot more suitable in terms of a draw weight. This is more like, well, I say 205 to 210 with worker darts is a fairly hefty blaster, and in this package or this size, it is quite a thing to prime. But it definitely works very well, and its compactness is brilliant compared to something like a Caliburn. Now this is fully operational, I should be taking it into gameplay once I've done my arm exercises, and we'll see how it gets on, but or I get on with it, we should say. So I've been Ben, it's been a Shots Fired Airsoft video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.